Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And very happy to see some of the new people here today, some of whom are actually old friends that I'm very happy to see again, and happy to see everyone here. Uh, I trust that the big audience today may have something to do with the very great and wonderful poem that we're up for talking about this week. Um, I really, I just felt we needed some kind of perspective on. I mean, the world is so awful right now, and that we needed some kind of perspective on what is, you know, sort of what some of our priorities need to be, and what makes a world worth living in. Um, I do think this is one of the greatest poems in English, one of the greatest poems ever written, and interesting and complicated one. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say when we start our discussion. But let me read it. Um, this is John Keats, Ode on a Grecian Urn. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape, of deities or mortals, or of both? In Tempe or the dales of Arcady, what men or gods are these? What maidens loath? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes, play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit, ditties of no tone. Fair youth, beneath the trees thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. Yet do not grieve, she cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. Ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. And happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peace or mountain built with peaceful sorry. What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell while thou art desolate, why thou art desolate, can e'er return. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou, silent form, dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity. Cold pastoral, when old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. I recommend all of you to read this aloud to yourselves or to a willing audience, if not a captive audience. So this is an ode. It says, Keats says, one of I think 5, possibly 6 that he wrote, and especially and one which we have already talked about, To Autumn, which is really an ode, although he doesn't use the word ode in the title, which is maybe kind of interesting to think about why, after he wrote 3 of the greatest odes in English, he would write another one and not call it an ode. But what do you know about odes?
Well, it's a Greek word, Lloyd, and signifies simply a song or something sung.
Right.
Just a song. Though in our time, I mean, it's accumulated some type of monumental meaning, I suppose, something of formality. There were Pindar's odes that were triadic with the turn and counter turn and stand, or what was it called? The strophe, anti-strophe, and epode.
Right.
And then
it began as just as you say, the word just means song, and it's actually as I recall, it's in the word tragedy. The end of the word tragedy is actually based on the word ode.
Yep.
So tragedy is a goat song. It's a song of sacrifice. And what began as a kind of simple song was developed, and especially by the Greek poet Pindar, into something maybe more religious, and definitely poetically much more complicated, with an extremely complicated form. And I think maybe even before we talk about what or talk or argue or discuss what this poem means, which is what people have been doing since 1819, that we might talk about the form of this poem, because Keats was in that spring of 1819 where he wrote the Ode to a Nightingale and the Ode on a Grecian Urn and the Ode on Melancholy. He kind of invented a new form, and the three odes are more or less in the same form, and they're 10-line stanzas, and they're a kind of mixture of the, or does anyone know about the has anyone really looked into the poetic form of these odes?
It's like a sonnet, only it's only one stanza, a quatrain, and then a sestet.
So yes, exactly. So he takes the sonnet form of the English sonnet, which has alternating rhymes, A, B, A, B, and he mixes that with the sestet, the last 6 lines of the Italian or the Petrarchan form, which is 3 rhymes, C, D, E, C, D, E, although sometimes he plays around with the order. But there's a quatrain. Each stanza begins with a 4-line section of alternating rhymes, and then ends with a sestet with a 6-line section of 3 new rhymes. And I think it's very interesting to speculate why Keats did this. I mean, why didn't he just write these odes as sonnets, as 14-line sections? And any thoughts about why he mixed those 2 forms?
Lloyd?
Yes. Hi, Jen.
I do find this 10-line form, especially using the variable rhyme pattern of the sestet, to be to have a more open, fluid, ongoing feeling than the strict closure we're used to hearing at the end of an English sonnet, especially because as he varies those rhymes in the 6 lines, you don't hear the stanza coming to a close in the same. I mean, it's still musical, it's still formal, it's still measured, but it if I were to say why adopt this variation of the sonnet for a poem that continues, I would say in the most basic terms, it allows for that kind of continuing.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I think also just the fact that it's a little shorter, that each section is a little shorter, means, I think, just as you're saying, there's less completion. There's more a sense that this is part of something. This isn't, each stanza isn't an entire unit itself. It's something that's moving on to that keeps moving on. And I really, one of the things that a quality that I think of in all of these Keats sonnets is a kind of cinematic quality, that well, there may be a scene that kind of that comes to or an attitude, feeling that comes to a pause, but that there's still something ongoing. There's still an ongoing investigation, and that the 10-line stanza really, really works kind of beautifully, phenomenally, as both bringing some idea to a conclusion and yet continuing to think about what all of this means. Now, David, I think you raise a point in the chat that is extremely important. I think a really crucial element of to know about this poem. And would you repeat what you wrote in the chat?
Well, I can't quote a source on this, but what
That
I've
does,
heard is
that's okay.
what I've heard is that this ode is actually on no particular urn. That
Right.
it's the urn is pastiched together, maybe.
Yeah.
So having the form be a cobbling of parts of other forms
Right.
could be
I was gonna
part of
I,
what he's saying.
I was gonna
Yeah.
ask a trick question, which was, does anyone know where this urn is located? And you have already answered it. It's entirely Keats's invention. This particular urn, as Keats described it, does not exist in real life. It's not in a museum. It's not in a collection. It's certainly based on ancient objects, inspired by ancient objects, but it's something completely made up by Keats. And what I mean, sort of the question that I have been asking myself for many years, ever since I started reading this poem, is why. And we're not going to answer this immediately. I think maybe our whole discussion is going to be involved in the answer to this question. That why is this the urn that Keats made up? Why does he include these particular elements in his description in this poem? And I have some answers for myself, but I would be I would never anyway. I have some of my own answers, but I'd be very interested in hearing yours. Let me encourage you, partly because of the Zoom screens, and partly because there are happily so many of you here today. I can't always read your comments in the chat, and they go by very quickly, but they're so intelligent and interesting that can you just not be so shy, and then just shout out your comments, because I want everyone to see them, including myself. Okay, Denise. The urn. Can you read what you just wrote?
The urn is the hypothetical ideal, which includes all the elements that Keats wanted to talk about in his ode.
Yeah, yeah. Very succinct and I think very accurate. So shall we talk about some of those elements? Um, uh, the very first thing that Keats says about the urn, and I think it's important not only just as a sort of as a picture of the urn, but really as a kind of it's the beginning of the, I think, of the large statement that that Keats is going to be making in this poem. Um, uh, one more thing. The first word of the poem um, is becomes really important when it comes to when we get to the very last line of the poem, because there is a kind of I'm not quite sure what the word is, a kind of bibliographical complication in the way this poem was printed, and has been the source of well uh, endless debate about the end of the poem. But don't forget that the first word of the poem is thou. And that, what does thou mean?
It is the you singular, the second person singular, and somewhat acquainted or intimate. It's very personal, addressed to you.
Right. Exactly. And I would say one of the maybe one of the most important words that you just used is singular. You singular. So it's a kind of personal, it's a very personal singular address to the urn. What about unravel? Oh, Bill, please.
Sorry, I was just wondering, am I right in supposing that English had ceased to be a so-called TV language with a distinction between an intimate you and a formal you of the kind we still have in French and German, you know, tu and vous and du and sie, so that Keats is immediately beginning with something which is archaic? Because it wouldn't have been in everyday use in England at that point to speak of thou. You would have assumed the general role.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, but that the certainly true in speech, maybe not quite so true in poetry, so that I think thou remained a pretty common word in English poetry,
So
maybe
contemporary,
maybe through the 19th century.
Right, so a contemporary reader wouldn't have felt that that was immediately archaic. It would have been, as it were, licensed by ongoing poetic practice, even if that had diverged from speech practice.
Right, that it would be kind of poeticism, but fairly standard poeticism.
Mm-hmm.
Still, we know it's an ode. It's an ode on a Grecian urn, and I like some. I can't. Was it David who? Was it you who said that that Grecian rather than Greek? Someone, yeah, that it's sort of Grecian, almost more in the style of, in the manner of, in that it's not an actual Greek urn, but is like, if I'm interpreting you correctly, it's something that's it's like a Greek urn. It's in the manner of a Greek urn.
Do it on a Greekish urn.
A Greekish urn. Oh, thank goodness he didn't call it that. So what about unravished bride?
Very strange, isn't it?
What do we
gets into the statistic?
What do we call that kind of locution? Or, well,
Kind of apophysis, a little bit, or a weird version of it that it invokes through negation.
okay, I'm thinking of something. I'm thinking of something. Yes, Jennifer. Yes, I'm thinking of something a little simpler, and that it's kind of paradoxical. That also in terms go no, Bill, go ahead.
Well, insofar as ravishment would imply the infliction of unwanted sexual attention,
Yeah.
Intercourse within marriage with a bride would presumably be sanctioned by the relationship, so that there seems a peculiar idea of violation being introduced here. But I mean, yeah. I've been, over the years, I've been inclined to read it as simply suggesting that the urn has miraculously survived intact. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah.
No, and I think that is the major point. Also, another bit of linguistic history. The word "still" in Keats's time still meant something slightly different from what we take it to mean.
I hesitate to say it because it's the kind of thing which you'll accuse me of always saying, but it's
good.
It hovers between adjective and adverb, doesn't it? It could be
yes.
Still bride or still unravished. Yet unravished. Could it not be adverbial in relation to the adjective?
Yes, and I think that is one of the things it means.
What about still quiet?
Yes, also that, and
it's also not moving.
All right, all correct. Yes, so all of those meanings, but there's one more meaning to the word "still," which is forever. Susan, thank you for agreeing with me. Really,
I've counted over 7 forevers in the poem thus far.
It's a really important word in the poem, and that, so of course it has to do with the quietness of it. It has to do with something about time. We know that time tends to destroy ancient objects or damage them. And all of those meanings seem to be loaded into that one word, but that the standard usage of the word still as late as the beginning of the 19th century was sort of always, so that what Keats is setting up is something about the urn that will never change. And really, it's one of the central issues in the poem is the idea that the urn is never going to change.
So are we reading it full? Sorry,
Bill. I'm sorry, Bill, and then
Oh, it's Catherine. I don't have a video.
hi, Catherine.
Hi.
So Bill first.
so I'm just wondering, I didn't know what you've just told us about the meaning of still at the time. Does that mean that we go astray and or we read it anachronistically when we take still unravished to mean yet unravished? That's the important thing.
I don't think so. I think it's at a kind of turning. There isn't a specific date that still changes its meaning, but it's changing right around the time that Keats, in early 19th century, right around.
So he could be self-consciously exploiting an ambiguity born of his recognition of the semantic change it's undergoing.
I really believe that's true. I really believe that's true. Catherine, what were you going to say?
I was going to, the intensity of Unravished Bride.
Yeah.
Doesn't that kind of look forward to Forever Panting?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it
reminded me of Juliet's gallop apace, ye fiery-footed steed. A bride. I think a bride could be not as within a marriage, but at the point of being a bride, and Unravished Bride is so has so much intensity of, as I say later on, Forever Panting.
Right. Not only intensity, but like unfulfillment. Like a bride is a liminal state on the way to being a wife, and like this poem is all about taking things in these like tense dramatic moments and then denying them time in which to move forward.
Yes,
exactly. Lloyd,
you don't get to go through with whatever it is.
Right, it's a
Jennifer.
I just wanted to drop one more comment in here about the many meanings of still.
Yes.
Which is to say that it's the almost opposite meanings. Think of a phrase, still life. The almost opposite meanings of still meaning stopped and still meaning ongoing. It's a word that shows up over the long tradition of poems responding to art, remarking on this paradox that what happens in the art has been stilled, has been stopped, like a still life. But because of that, it continues to exist for viewers to see through the ages, and only to say that those there are many poems exploiting this. It's lovely that the term comes so early in Keats's poem. Also, as a footnote to your other points about the history of the word, surely that older meaning just falls away, but that the idea of yet has always been part of the poem is full of slightly subliminal double meanings in other ways. So it was never, I don't take your point to mean he was ever choosing one, but he could be exploiting all of those without our being anachronistic in reading our.
I think that's true. I think that's true. But let us get to the second line. Foster child of silence and slow time. what is he setting up about this, about the urn, about the nature of the creation of this urn, which, as we said, is almost completely made up. Foster child. Why foster child? Whose child is this urn?
In a sense, Lloyd, it's every generation's child that gets to
I want to be more specific.
Is it his child?
Sure. It's Keats's child. I mean, he's made it up. So it's a foster child of silence, again, which is, well, it's silence and time, and that pair of, yes, yeah, Denise, I agree with you. I'm trying to read these chats while I'm talking and listening at the same time. It's hard. But so there's something temporal about it. There's something quiet about it. I mean, silence and still, it's such an interesting opening to this poem. It's setting up so many important, I mean, it's really, hi, Selena.
Hi, Lloyd. Just asking why the capital letters?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's in my copy, they're not in capital letters. Is it in capital letters in what I sent you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems to me that it might be almost like a personification as the parents.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I kind of like it with the capital letters.
I do too. Actually, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Could I
yes.
butt in for a second?
Jonathan, yeah.
To me, it's being the foster child. I mean, it's not the actual child. It's not the child. Silence and Slow Time didn't intend for this vase to survive. It happened to be there, and I think to me the fact that he's using it partly as a symbol of permanence, but it's also something that could get smashed. That it's something that could break at some point.
Except that it's not a real urn, and the urn is in Keats's head.
Yes.
So it may be, I mean, at least so far, it still exists. It exists on the page, if not in a museum. And
so once again, a poet asserting that his work will last longer than anything else.
A long tradition. A long tradition. So far, so good. But yes, exactly. It's part of it. It's a poem in that tradition of life is short, art is long, life is short. Sylvan historian. I mean, that's a kind of, Sylvan is such an old-fashioned word. It's not completely gone, but any thoughts about, I have a I have a horrible feeling we could be here all day and not get through the first stanza. But let's see. We'll move forward in a bit. But there's so much going on in this, just in this opening stanza. What do you make of Sylvan historian? What is Sylvan?
Woods, which is a little weird for an urn, which you wouldn't tend to find in the woods.
Well, except what's depicted on it is it's kind of woodland scene, especially.
But
go ahead.
But the woods are a fiction.
Yes,
within the fictional urn.
Right.
So it's the woods are really wrapped in multiple levels of fakeness.
Yeah. Also, for me, the important thing is, I mean, there's so much paradox in this poem, and the poem begins in such a paradoxical. Hi, Catherine. Begins in such a paradoxical manner, and Sylvan historian to me seems another example of that kind of paradox, that history and woodlands are not usually connected. I mean, when we talk about history, we talk about war, we talk about nation building, we talk about people in office, kings and rulers and presidents and but Sylvan historian, yes, Susan.
Well, but the woods are where people go for enlightenment and transformation, and mystical things happen in the woods.
Oh,
so I don't know this is
I would add at least one more element, and that is sexual.
Well, okay.
People go out into the woods to make out.
But it's not historian in the
exactly.
In the
but that
literal sense.
Yeah, exactly, and that's really the point. So that there's something in the way Keats sets up this image of the urn. There seem to be kind of cross purposes or things that don't usually go together, like unravished bride. Catherine, yeah.
I think since this is a Grecian urn, and the standard or the most famous for being Greek tree is also the oldest, that this is just sort of tying into that. As you think of olive trees, if you go to the Garden of Gethsemane, there are trees there that are 2,000 years old. So it's sort of a link to the fact it's a Grecian urn, so that even woods last a long, long time.
Yeah, well, they do on the urn, on this urn.
They do on the urn, right.
On this imaginary urn.
I had a other small point at the beginning. It seems to me that one of the things the poet is demanding is that we see it in our mind's eye. And therefore, my picture and your picture will inevitably be different and therefore can last longer, because I'm not stuck with, the simple one that's there.
The literal.
Yeah.
The literal description. Yes. Yeah. Sylvan historian who can thus express, and express is a little loaded, because I think at least I think of express as as having more to do with language. Maybe, I mean, obviously images express qualities, but I think in using this word express has more of a kind of linguistic than visual impulse, and it's talking about history. So it's the background here has a lot to do with writing. With writing. Jim,
I was
you want to say something.
I did.
Good.
It was because the beginning is all about quietness and silence.
Yes.
And here we are now, the historian, and expressing. So it's, all of a sudden it's opening up the language.
Right.
And it goes on to say, of course, that the urn or the poem, is more than he can say. It's the, anyway, it's that paradox that.
No, I totally agree with you. Totally
But
agree.
I thought also maybe he was setting up what's going to happen at the end of the poem.
Definitely.
He's addressing the object, but now he's implying there is speech from the object that's latent, and eventually,
right? But latent, but yes, and the object will talk at the end. Will actually say something at the end, even though it's the foster child of silence. What leaf-fringed, who can thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. So there's something about this image that he's creating, that he says is better than my writing. So there's already, there's so many mixed messages. Protesting a little too much. There's a kind of, maybe false modesty about this. I mean, it's his rhyme that is expressing the flowery tale. What leaf-fringed legend haunts? I mean, God, every single word in this poem is so loaded. What about legend? What are some of the meanings, or at least what are a couple of the meanings of the word legend?
Well, besides the old tales, but also the clue, the element in a map that's going to give you a way to decipher.
Right. So there's something kind of written or some sort of image on a map that tells you mileage and distance and give that is purely information. And it seems to me legend here really means both of those things. Legend as a kind of, well, of course, this is all legendary. This is the ancient world. This is a recreation of the ancient world, of a story, of an ancient story, or an ancient image at least. But that there's also a kind of clue in somewhere in the corner. There's some kind of explanation that tells you what all of this is supposed to mean, or how we're supposed to look at it.
It's Greek to him, isn't it? Because if one thinks of on first looking into Chapman's Homer, there he dramatizes the fact that he's not a Greek speaker, and this legend would be in Greek, and so ironically, the urn bears an inscription which would explain the scenes it depicts, but of course he can't decipher it, and that's what leads into the flurry of questions. He's obliged to ask these questions because he can't read the answer.
So glad you mentioned questions, because suddenly we are flooded with questions. What leaf-fringed legend haunts? Such a loaded word, because there's a mystery. I mean, that it's not something literal and factual, but some kind of ghost of a meaning.
And a ghost of a meaning precisely because of his linguistic inadequacy. Something substantive becomes spectral because he can't decipher the damn thing.
Right. What leaf fringe legend haunts about thy shape? And the word shape will come back. So, and I think the next line is really important and really sets up almost everything that happens in the rest of the poem. Of deities or mortals or of both. And I just want to say, I really do want to try to move forward a little bit. But in a way, part of the point of this poem is that these figures are figures that, at least in this poem, in Keats's mind, are going to be there forever. And that, in a way, it's almost irrelevant whether they are deities or mortals, whether they are human beings or gods. They're still going to be there forever. Which, in a way, makes them, even if they're just people, even if they're just mortals, they're still going to be there forever, as if they were gods. And that it almost doesn't matter whether deities or mortals. Well, we're not sure. Are these gods? Are these gods? Or are these just people going out into the woods and chasing each other? Is it a god chasing a mortal? The source of many Greek legends, many haunting Greek legends. But it almost doesn't matter, because whoever they are, they're going to be there as long as we can read this poem.
But does he also revel in uncertainty? In the fact that he doesn't or can't resolve the question, and the poem is pushed forward by its flurry of questions, makes me think of the notion of negative capability, the ability to live in a state of uncertainty without irritable reaching after fact.
Exactly. You for those who don't know, Bill is actually quoting a famous letter by Keats. And yes, that power of living in more than one way at the same time is a very profound moment. And then the questions are, it's almost as if Keats can't stop himself. What men or gods are in Tempe or the Dales of Arcady. Tempe and Arcady are areas of Greece, and especially of Grecian pastorals, which are kind of symbolic. They could be plays or poems in which shepherds are really poets, and everything is kind of allegorical. And these are two of the places in Greece. They're real places, but they're also the places where a lot of Greek poetry and I think plays also take place. So they're both real and imaginary at the same time.
May I ask a question?
Please.
This is about the era when there was considerable discussion in England about the Elgin marbles, and
Yes.
and they were apparently shown starting in 1807 in a house, and then got to the British Museum about 1816 by
Right.
a vote of 2.
Huh.
And it would have been, for some people, a hot topic. And
Oh,
in a
definitely.
way, this sort of talking about the eternal nature of these images, yeah, and we got good pictures of them too. You know,
Yeah.
we have them on our walls.
Right. And it was a hot topic, in particular among the circle of artists and writers that Keats was connected to. So Keats was very aware of this, and wrote a sonnet about seeing the Elgin marbles for the first time. One of his great sonnets. So you're absolutely right. So there's this kind of atmosphere, of a topic of discussion, of definitely a hot topic of discussion, um, uh, definitely behind this poem. What mad pursuit, what struggle to escape, what pipes and timbrels, what wild ecstasy. I mean, he really can't stop. He's also, he's also aware of some kind of some potential sexual violence being depicted on this urn that he has made up. Let us not forget. It's not he's saying, oh, look, there's this urn with this potential rape going on. I am appalled. But he has made it up. He's creating this image of a possible sexual violence. He's not saying it is, but he's asking about it, and he's asking about it as if he can actually see it. And then we get to the third stanza, and suddenly, after all these questions, and you can almost feel him kind of out of breath, asking one question after another, and then suddenly everything calms down, and he becomes very philosophical. Heard melodies are sweet. Yeah, I like music. But those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, it's all very logical. Therefore, ye soft pipes. Well, how soft are they? Well, they are inaudible. They're really quiet. They're silent. Therefore, ye soft pipes, play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared. This means more than just hearing a pretty tune or someone playing a panpipe. Not to the sensual ear, but more endeared. Pipe to the spirit, ditties of no tone. Fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song. And I think what interests me about this passage is how negative all of this is. This is all couched in very negative terms. It's not saying you're going to be there forever. He's going to say that later. But he's saying, this is what you can't do. You're stuck. Thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Well, that sort of sounds nice. And yet he says it in this kind of negative way, as if, well, there may be a kind of problem about this. That you don't have a lot of choice. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss. I mean, he could say never, never, never. That would even be more negative, but he doesn't have to. It's really just repeating it. And why is that important? If he were one of those figures, what would he want? He would want a kiss. But these figures can't. Ever. Never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. Well, you can almost kiss, but you can't. You can't actually kiss. Yet do not grieve. Well, we're picturing this urn, this imaginary urn with two imaginary lovers. Yes, Denise. Yes, yes, yes. We're picturing this imaginary urn with two imaginary lovers who are just about to kiss. And Keats says to them, do not grieve. Are they grieving? Who's grieving? Where does grief come from? All of a sudden. I mean, that's a real question. I'm asking. Mary? I'm sorry. You look like you have something to say.
I just lost oh, there you all are. Oh, how funny. No, I loved it that you were correcting. I think I don't feel that I have the answer here, but it seems so complex. Like it's only by virtue of time. I don't know. It's like, it seems like a conflict of time passing and the eternal moment, right? We can only superimpose or whatever. We can only kind of project grief. Right. Looking at them being stuck. Right. In time. Yeah. But in that stuck moment, it's like maybe the best. Like it's maybe the best moment. The anticipation and again, the anticipated thing is yet imagined.
Right.
And so it's kind of like the imagined urn or the unheard music.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Em, what were you going to say?
Well, I think, if you think about his whole life in general and knowing that he knew what his life was going to be and it was going to be short and he had this great desire, I mean, the passion that he had, that he knew it's just so his grief. I mean, it's his grief, I think, for him in his life and what he's not going to get. And
yeah, although I do want to say,
that's not
as far as we know, Keats was the first person who knew he had a death sentence.
Right.
But it was later than these odes when he discovered he had TB as his young, I mean, he was surrounded by illness and death, and his younger brother had already died. But he didn't know about his own illness until sometime, maybe almost a year later than these odes.
But he was surrounded by.
But he was a medical student. He was surrounded by people dying, and especially young people dying. So there was no question that he was conscious of mortality, although not quite yet his own.
But I think part of the lure of this poem, the intensity of it, is us knowing his history as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yet do not grieve. And then there's the explanation. She cannot fade, though thou hast not, and more negative, though thou hast not thy bliss. She cannot fade. It's all couched in this negative. This is supposed to be, this is the good part. She cannot fade, but it's couched in these negative terms. Again, it's part of this paradox that's so poignant. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. And then finally, something really positive comes in the last line of the stanza. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. So finally, after all of this negativity, all of this stuff you can't do, you can't move, you can't kiss, but she's always going to be the girl, the nymph, the young woman is always going to be there, and she's always going to be beautiful. And that's the positive thing that finally comes out of all this negativity. And then we get kind of more of the same. Happy boughs. Wow. The trees are happy. That cannot, and they're happy because of something they can't do. That cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. Well, is that positive? Is that negative? It's kind of both. And there is this paradox, this central paradox where good things and bad things are inextricable.
Lloyd, can I say something about happy?
Please. Yes, please.
Because I don't think I've ever heard it so clearly as when you read it today. All the happies in this stanza, how that ha to me became the sound of breathing and of panting. And,
wow.
If the happy is, as to borrow somebody's term from the other stanza, if the happy is the intensity of Keats's projection onto it, he keeps saying happy, 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 and then he exhausts himself, forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion.
Breathing human passion.
That he's kind of summoned that into the sound of the stanza with the the happies coming faster than the questions did in the first stanza. Anyway, I just heard it when you read it, because we've got haunt, we've got heard, but it's not a poem full of H's, and you don't have to say it's on purpose to say we feel that's what's coming in addition to the repetition of the word, that it's a great word for happiness because it makes him keep breathing harder.
And it's what you lose the capacity of when you have TB.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah. And well, thank you, because I wasn't doing that intentionally, I don't think. But maybe, I don't know, maybe. More happy love, more happy love forever. Then here is this great thing. Oh, thank you, Dennis. Really great to see you. I hope you can come back next month and keep me posted on what's happening with you. It's what a great treat to see you. Anyway, all more happy love, a happy, happy love, forever warm, forever warm. Wow. Forever warm and still to be enjoyed. And again, still, I think here still has that older meaning of always rather than and yet to be. It's again, it's both, but I think here it has that sort of older meaning of always to be enjoyed. It's always in the future. Forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above. And that's, is that something we want? Do we really want to be above all breathing human passion? I mean, breathing human passion. Isn't that what we kind of live for? Do we want to be above that? I mean, that's sort of the positive thing. And yet these figures are above that. And then there are drawbacks to breathing human passion because they leave a heart high, sorrowful, and cloyed. Cloyed is really interesting. Well, we fall in love. It's exciting. It's kind of what we live for. And then we get tired of it. We get satiated with it. At least that's a possibility. And that, oh, well, is that what we really want? Well, yes and no. And a burning forehead and a parching tongue. And there's, you know, this passion almost is described almost as a disease, as an illness. And oh, thank you, Gail. And then we're almost running out of time. And we get to one of the most interesting moments in the poem and in it seems to me in poetry. This abrupt turning point. And now suddenly we're looking at the other side of this imaginary urn. And again, this didn't have to be there. This isn't a description of something that already exists. It's a description of something in Keats's imagination. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? Well, what does sacrifice have to do with this passionate pursuit of passion, of love, of being out in the woods and people chasing each other around and being just about to kiss? Well, suddenly we have a completely different scene. And why? It seems to me one of the really profound questions about this poem is why is there an image? Does the image completely change to an image of a sacrifice? And it's kind of gorgeous image. It's a really beautiful, marvelously, like a scene in the Elgin Marbles.
Yeah, I mean, it's that long image of that parade to make not to sacrifice, meaning kill an animal, but to sacrifice making something holy, which is what the word means.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar? Well, there isn't any green in or at least no green has survived in ancient Grecian art, in ancient Greek art. It was probably there, and if it was, Keats wouldn't have known that. So green altar seems to me is a kind of very loaded poetic phrase, and that I take green as a kind of euphemism for or some image of living, of the like the woodland, the you know, the leaf fringed legend.
It's a return of the Sylvan.
Yes, the Sylvan historian. Exactly. What green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies? I think that's just so beautiful. It's so gorgeously written. I think more happy love is not one of the great lines of English poetry. It's very dramatic and very intense in this poem. I love it, but I wouldn't single it out as one of the most beautifully written lines in English. But leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies, I think is just sublime. It's just so beautiful. And all her silken flanks with garlands dressed. I mean, it's such a beautiful image of something that is not exactly going to be beautiful.
Right.
What little town? And again, he's imagining this isn't the Acropolis. It's what little town by river or seashore. Again, and it's another question because he doesn't know the answer to this question. What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel? Peaceful citadel, again, another kind of paradox, is emptied of this folk this pious morn. And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul. Now it's sort of turned negative. This quiet. We'll never know the answer. Will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can e'er return. So the town is empty. We don't know the story behind this, and we'll never know. And we can't ever know because it's all in Keats's imagination. Oh, Attic shape. So Grecian, now it's become almost abstract. It's not even an image, it's just a shape. Oh, Attic shape, fair attitude. It's an attitude. It's a pose. We can't even quite see it anymore. It's become an idea with breed of marble men. And I love the word breed. Breed here. I mean, I think this is a great pun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think breed here literally means like embroidery. It's like the BRD in embroidery. It's the thing that's kind of, it's the design that's drawn on top of the urn with breed. But it's also breed, BREED, is also kind of what this poem is all about. I mean, is it is it just an image, or is it saying something about life, about living? With breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. And I love overwrought also. I think that's really terrific. And that it's, again, literally, it's what's pictured on top of something, of like wrought iron, overwrought. But then, of course, all these passionate would-be lovers are also are emotionally overwrought. So I love the way Keats is actually playing with the language at this point. Thou with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form, thou, don't forget the thou first word in the poem, thou silent form, dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity. And yeah, that's what eternity does. It's really kind of hard to imagine it. It's hard to think what that really is. If we mortals, we know what eternity means, but we really can't imagine it. A cold pastoral. Well, suddenly there's the Grecian urn, and it's green, and it's people are overwrought, and they're passionate, and there's a sacrifice, but it's a cold pastoral. It's limitation. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours. There's always woe. There's no escaping that. It's our woe. It's the next generation's woe. It's the past generation's woe. It's the woe of the generation after that. If you're alive, if you're human, there's going to be woe. In midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest. And then these last lines are very interesting, and they have been much debated. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. And the question is, who is saying what and to whom? And when one of the reasons this is a question, and it's one of the reasons that in the copy I think in the copy that I sent to you, there are no quotation marks. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the literary problem is that when yes, David, yeah. The literary problem is that in the first printed edition of Keats's poem, of this poem, and he was already ill by then, there are quotation marks around beauty is truth, truth beauty. And then there are no quotation marks for that is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. And so, but we don't have Keats's original copy of this poem, but we have copies of it that were made by his friends. I mean, Keats was, by the time he published the poem, he was already ill. But we have copies of his manuscript, like 6 copies by his friends, and they don't have any quotation marks at all. And the question is, who is saying that? And who is saying it to whom? And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. I'd be very interested. I have very definite ideas about those last lines, which is one of the reasons I sent it to you in the form that I sent it to you. In the copy that I have, it has quotation. Oh no! In the copy that I have, it has quotation marks around the entire 2 last lines, which doesn't exist in any early edition or in any manuscript. Although I think it's actually correct in what the editor decided to do with it.
So are you saying, Lloyd, that there's no doubt that beauty is truth, beauty is uttered by the urn, but there's some doubt relating to whether that is all, is Keats's comment on the urn's statement or part of the urn statement?
Yes. Or whether it's Keats's address to humanity after reading what he thinks the urn is saying. Beauty is truth, beauty. And then that there's some critics interpret that the last line and a half as this is what Keats is saying to all of the rest of us.
Even before we get to the question of whether that is all and so on is uttered by the urn, isn't there already a peculiarity in that the bit which is clearly derived from the urn, beauty is truth, beauty, is somewhat discrepant? It doesn't feel like the message which has been imparted by the scenes which have been described previously. Do you see what I'm driving at?
Yeah, I do, and I think these last lines are a challenge. I know they make sense to me in the as that the truth of the urn, which is embodied in its beauty. I'll just tell you what I think and throw it out there. That the truth of the urn that is embodied in its beauty is that it lives forever and we don't. But that the truth is also that we are alive and the figures on the urn aren't. And that's the trade-off. That's the paradox. And it's the paradox of art. That art tells us, art reminds us that 2 things: that we don't live forever, but that we are alive. And it reminds us that it lives forever, or some version of forever, but it's not alive. Never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. And that it's the nature of art, the paradoxical nature of art, that tells us these 2 almost contradictory things. And why art is important, why art is profound, why we need art, is that it reminds us of these 2 things, that these 2 kind of facts, if you will, that art is great. Ars longa vita brevis est. Art is great. It lives forever. It will at least as longer than any of us will. But that it's not alive, and that the value of one of the values of art, of a work of art, of a poem, of an urn, of a little painting the size of an old style dollar bill, is that that it may live forever, or as long as it can, longer than us, but it's still not alive. And that this is the profound thing that Keats understood even at the age of 25 when he wrote this poem. And that it's a paradox, it's a mystery, and that compounded by the fact that it's, that it was printed in a different way than he may have wrote it, Gesundheit. And that's what it leaves us with, and what an astonishing and moving and heartbreaking and yet optimistic piece of work that this is. I mean, it just seems to me that it is just one of the great human utterances, and that anyway, Jim, yeah.
No, I think what you're saying is very moving and very powerful. But also the interesting thing, paradoxically, is that the distinction between art and life is really melded, or is sort of undercut by the fact that the urn is created by the man who is
person.
So it's him all through. It's not a separate in that way, and that's what we're struggling with, I think.
Yeah, foster child of silence and slow time, but it's really it's my baby.
Right. Foster child is actually I was been wondering about that phrase all through. Yeah.
Would you end this class by reading it again?
Oh God.
I think now we're ready.
Do you have time for it? We've kind of gone over time, but
it's only going to take you 3 minutes.
We have, but I'd love to hear you read it again.
Okay. Well, I would love to read it again. Ode on a Grecian Urn. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape, of deities or mortals or of both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens loath? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes, play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Fair youth, beneath the trees thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. Yet do not grieve, she cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. Ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. And happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs, forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell while thou art desolate can e'er return. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity. Cold pastoral, when old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. Well, thank you. Thank you for listening and contributing such, as always, such insightful comments and thank you so much. Really wonderful to see you all.